Well, hello there today. How are you? My name is Pam, and I have a very important message for you. And today's message is mainly comparing the story of the Israelites, their exodus, and going into the promised land, and comparing that to what we're facing today. And God has a special message in that. There is a pattern that exists, and I don't know if many of you have heard this, but this is what the Lord was speaking to me. And I want to start out today by reminding everyone out there of the story of the disciples in the boat. They were scared. Remember, they were scared because the waves, they were being tossed about, even though they were with Jesus, the Son of God. They were still afraid in the boat. And Mark 4:39 through 40 says, "And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, 'Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?'" And isn't this just like us? I mean, every one of us mostly. We are with him, and he is with us, and he is in us, but we are still afraid because most of us have difficulty trusting others, especially, if we've been hurt by people. It takes some time to develop trust, doesn't it? But typically, when someone does prove to be trustworthy, our confidence in them should increase. And then we can let our guards down, and then we kind of relax. And there's a reason for that. And it's because there's a consistent pattern of faithfulness demonstrated by this person. Okay? So it's the same with God. And that's why knowing God is so important, because we learn to trust him as we get to know him. And we can know the Lord by walking with him. He proves who he is as we walk with him, just as he's done in the past in the Bible. And his word too. His word is a depiction and a testimony of God's consistent faithfulness. And that's what we need to keep near our hearts. Okay, so today in this word from the Lord, the goal here is that it increases your faith and hope, and it prepares you for what's coming. And you can see it coming. You can see what's gone on lately. And there's a great deal to fear, but we don't need to fear, okay? God is going to do supernatural things during this time, trust me. And if this is not the tribulation period that we're getting ready to go into, know that God still does supernatural things. It doesn't matter. I've seen it. Okay? So the point of this, then, we need to remember that God is calling us out of Egypt. Okay? He's calling us out. He did call us out. When we became saved, he was calling us out. But some of us need to come totally out of Egypt, okay? We need to actually walk with the Lord into the wilderness so that we can get into the promised land. And that's the idea. We don't need to fear, though. And the reason why we don't need to fear is because our God is the same as he was yesterday. And he will always be the same, right? Always. And our God will defend us, just as he did the Israelites, and just as he did so many others in the Bible. He will defend us, and he will prepare the way for his people. So we don't need to fear. In saying that, though, before I go on, I actually want to explain that my perspective on the rapture has changed over the decades that I have been a Christian. So I was a pre-tribber when I first began my walk with the Lord. And after many years, I changed my mind. And so I believe the account that's in Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 through 31. Okay, I believe that that is a depiction of the rapture. So I believe that we're going to go through most of the tribulation, okay? And to me, I believe the rapture is actually depicted in Revelation chapter 14, just prior to God's wrath or his bowls being poured out, okay? So, and I just want to say that because, you know, I want you to understand my perspective in this whole thing. And it's okay if we don't agree. I'm not, you know, I don't really think that that's a big deal. You know, and I know that we can all change our minds at some time based on study that we've done, or not change our minds, and that's okay. But I just want to say too that I hope that you're right if you're a pre-tribber, because I don't want to be here. But I hope that, you know, God does bring us to the promised land earlier than I anticipate. So I hope that you're right. But in the Word of God, we do find examples of God's physical deliverance and spiritual protection that occur even through his judgment, okay? So God can do two things at one time. And we need to recognize that. And during the tribulation, there are examples in Revelation 12, 13 through 16, and in Revelation 7 and 14, that he will protect us from some of the things that are going to occur during the tribulation, similar to the ways that God protected the Israelites in Egypt, okay? So there's a pattern, and that's what I want to show you, that God calls us out of this world. He redeems us from sin and bondage, okay? And, you know, he's even calling us out of Babylon, right? And that's what his word said. So there's a wilderness or trials and tribulation, you know, that we go through once we're called out. And that's the truth. So, you know, but after those trials, after the tribulation, after the wilderness, we, his children, will go to the promised land. That's what it says. So Moses, like many of us, had to learn to trust God. He doubted God, or, you know, he doubted what God could do through him. So Moses is one of many biblical examples that should teach us to trust God. He will give us the words to speak, and he will give us the ability to do what he wants us to do. Even if we don't have the strength, even if we don't have the ability, God is faithful. He will provide. And we need to trust that. So he is calling you out too. Not just me, not just Moses, not just, you know, Joe or whoever. You know, he's not just calling out someone else. He's calling you out too. Trust that he will give you the ability to do what he wants you to do, especially right now as we go through these trials, as we go through this, you know, time of tribulation. Okay, Daniel 11:32 says, he will seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. That is exactly what you will do if you know your God. See? Notice that he says the people who know their God. It's very similar to the Israelites. We need to know him, and then we can stand firm and take action, right? But before we can know him, what do we need to do? We need to walk out of bondage. We need to leave sin behind. We need to leave fear behind to really know him and do what he wants us to do. So we need to respond to that call. When the Lord calls us out, we need to step out. We need to walk out and have faith. So we can't walk two roads at the same time, okay? Because those roads are going different directions. So we need to be on the same road as he's on. not on a different road. So there's only one way out of Egypt, only one. And there's only one way to get to the promised land, right? So, and also I want to add, okay, that we need to leave Babylon. So, see, the Lord didn't say just come out. You know, he didn't just call us out. He also calls us to leave Babylon, okay? So many Christians have been corrupted by this false idolatrous system that he is going to use to manipulate and control people. Trust me, he will. We need to come out of Babylon. So in Exodus 6, it says that God heard the cries of his people while they were held in slavery due to the abuse and oppression from the Egyptians. God said, I have remembered my covenant. Just as we need to remember his promises to us, our God is faithful and just, isn't he? In John 16:33, it says, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. So the Lord is promising peace in this world, even though the world is in travail right now, in this world too. Not just in the world prior, but in this world, during this time. Okay? So because the Lord hears our cries, and he does hear our cries, and it is for the sake of those, it is for our sake, for the elect's sake, that those days will be cut short. Remember Matthew 24:22. It is for our sake. That's what he said. So trust him, believe him. Our God is going to miraculously deliver us. Put your faith in that. Know him. So the story of the Israelites begins with God calling them out of Egypt to serve him, to know him, and to worship him only. That's the whole gist of it, right? So just as he calls us out of this world to serve him, to know him, and to worship him, it's exactly the same, isn't it? So while God was pouring out his judgment on the Egyptians and the Israelites were kept safe, because God had set aside the land of Goshen for his people to dwell safely. That's why. During the tribulation, Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, run to the mountains, in Matthew chapter 24, verses 15 through 16. In Matthew, like the Exodus account, God is setting aside a place. Do you see that? Just like the land of Goshen, God is setting aside a place to provide protection. Okay? He's even giving the direction to go. He's even telling them when to go. So see, God is speaking. He's speaking at that time to these people, just the way God was speaking to the Israelites that were in bondage under the Egyptians. So in Matthew, God makes a distinction in Matthew and in Exodus. He makes a distinction between his children and the world, doesn't he? Because we are not of this world. The Israelites had not learned who they were in the eyes of God. They had not learned or heard of Psalms 91:1. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. So while they were, much like us, safe in Goshen, we're safe right now, right? And they had no fear. All of that changed, didn't it? All of it changed once they came out. Just like all of the safety that we once had is now changing, okay? And they had to leave their safe space. And God called them out to face the enemy that was pursuing them. So as they were forced to face their enemy and face fear and uncertainty, they had to face it head on. Just like we're having to face this head on. They had to learn to trust God, and that's what we need to do. We have to learn to trust the Lord. So we are called out to do the same. Okay? Many times in life, we have to be called out of this safe space, this safe place, or whatever it is. We are called out, and we have to learn to trust him. And we must know the Lord, okay, in order to trust him, in order to learn to trust him. So Moses told the Israelites in Exodus 6:6, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. He is declaring who he is. He says, I am the Lord. I will bring you out from under these burdens. I will deliver you. Okay? I will do it. I will redeem you. That's what he's saying. Okay? Not you, not anything you could do, not anything Sam could do, or, anybody. I will do this. You don't need to worry. You don't need to do anything. Just leave it behind. Just leave your sin. Leave the bondage. Leave Babylon. Leave whatever it is. Because I'm calling you out, and I will redeem you. That's what the Lord our God is declaring even this day. Similarly, God calls his people to come out of Babylon. It is the same. Come out of Babylon. Revelation 18:4, John writes, then I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people. He's saying, my people. These aren't the children of the world. These are his people. He's declaring, come out of her. And he says, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. Right? As we enter this time, we need to believe and trust God. And the proof of that is in our obedience. Okay? So we need to come out of Babylon. Then in verse 7 of chapter 6, he says, I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. God was trying to teach them who he is, just as he does with us. God displayed his power, might, and strength, that he alone is God, and he alone is able to deliver, redeem us as he did them. Okay? So the Lord called them and us to know him and to trust him, to have a relationship with him. So, when I was looking at this whole thing that God was trying to show me, and I was putting the pieces together, and I didn't know exactly where God was leading with this until I got it all put together. And then the Lord started speaking through it. And this is the part where I feel like God was speaking to me about this. I don't know if you've heard of these visions or dreams. A lot of people have had this same one. And I'm going to include myself personally, because I too saw a wall of water. Okay. And, people are claiming it's a prophetic thing. And I'm tending to believe there's some truth to that, because like I said, I've had the same thing. And it's either like a large wave or a wall of water, something like that. And, when I was looking at this story, I thought, this is very similar. And it brought to mind what I had seen. And many interpret this as being a tsunami or a flood or, something like that. And it's a pretty logical assumption considering the Bible does describe, the waves and the seas roaring. But there's another option that I want you, to maybe be aware of and consider, and it could have a dual fulfillment too, because a lot of times these prophecies in the Bible too, they have dual fulfillments. But it could be that God is trying to say that he will prepare our way and protect us, just as he did the Israelites. You see, the wall of water, it may not be a great flood, or it could be a great flood too. But I believe that this was what the Lord was showing to be this wall of water, that he will part the waters. He will. So, and the thing with prophetic things, when we see things or we dream things, sometimes the interpretation can get a little bit sticky because it may not be literal, right? It could be something spiritual, and we don't always know. And so people may be misinterpreting it as being literal, and maybe it's something spiritual God is trying to show us. But anyway, back to Exodus 14:10. He said, when leaving Egypt, the Israelites could see the Egyptian army, and they became afraid. So they began crying out to Moses and said that it would have been better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Do you think it would be better to serve this man? I don't. So in Exodus 14:13 through 14, so Moses responded, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Okay, so before I get into this next part, that's the thing. We can choose to serve or bow, can't we? Which would be easy here in on this earth, rather than facing what we could face, okay? But we need to choose God. We need to put the Lord first. We need to come out, and we need to depart, So Exodus 14:19 through 20, then the angel of God who was going before the host of Israel moved and went behind him, and the pillar of the cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud in the darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. So they see the enemy and immediately they doubt the Lord. Just like us, we see the enemy, we see all of these things going on, and some of us, we begin to doubt the Lord and his ability. We begin to doubt what God can do. We cannot allow fear to bring doubt into our minds. We need to have faith. So Moses said, fear not. Be silent and stand firm, and God will do all the work. Isn't that exactly the way that it is? When God calls us to leave Egypt, when he calls us out, we need not fear, but we need to stand firm and be silent. We will see the salvation of our Lord. Mark 13:26 says, and then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. The Lord will fight for us, as he did in Egypt. He will consume the Antichrist with the breath of his mouth and destroy him with the brightness of his coming. 2 Thessalonians 2:8. So in these last days, we may feel like the Israelites. They saw the Egyptians closing in, and there was no place to go, right? There appeared to be no hope. And what did Moses say? He said, fear not, stand firm and be silent, right? See the salvation of the Lord. That's what we need to do. So Exodus 14:21-30 says, Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left, the Egyptians pursued and went in after them in the midst of the sea. All Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen, and in the morning watched the Lord in the pillar of fire and of cloud, looked down on the Egyptians, on the Egyptian forces, and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariots' wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, Let us flee before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, Stretch out your hand over the sea, and the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared, and as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and it says, of all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, and the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. So, isn't this interesting? The Lord not only provided a way for salvation, but he destroyed their enemy, just as he will do in these last days. God did all these things. He called them out of bondage. And of course, they had to agree to leave, right? Like we need to agree to leave. He did all this, and then he took them into the wilderness, where he provided food, water, guidance, and clothing that didn't wear out. Okay. But still, they had unbelief, and it was expressed by their fear. You see? So this is exactly what kept them from going into the promised land. And they just failed to trust God. In Deuteronomy 1:26-33, even though Moses assures the people that God will fight for them just as he did Egypt, they do not trust God to fulfill his promises. So fear can lead to disobedience, okay? In Hebrews chapter 3, it explains that there is a connection between disobedience and unbelief. So Hebrews 3:18-19 tells us that the Israelites could not go because of unbelief. And God kept the disobedient from the promised land. If you believe something, you're going to do it. You're going to act on that belief. If a person professes to believe in the Lord, but lives a life of continual sin and disobedience, does he really believe? That's the question. So here's something to ponder. Revelation 21:8 paints a picture of the same concept, really. When you look at part of the verse, it says, But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. So the cowardly, the faithless, the disobedient cannot go into the promised land, just like then. It is the same, okay? And this is in Revelation. So we need to know God. We need to know him so that we can hear his voice, because he's calling us to come out from bondage, come out from sin, come out from Babylon. And don't harden our hearts as in the rebellion. Just come out of your Egypt, okay? And second, what the Lord is saying is we cannot allow unbelief and fear to control us, especially during these times. You understand how bad it's going to get, you know? And we're going to need to know God, to trust God, because he is going to be our guide, just as he was the Israelites' guide. Okay? So, and third, we need to quietly stand firm and let him fight for us. This is key. He will give us the words, like in Luke 12:12, right? He gives us the words. He will provide the way. He will provide safety for us. Remember the lesson of the Israelites. When God calls us out, belief says, I will go where you want me to go. I will do what you want me to do. Okay? And our God is faithful to bring us into the promised land. That's his promise to his children. It was then and it is now. So that is what the Lord is speaking this day. And there's a good reason for that, considering what we're going through right now. And that is how we are to be during these last days. So I pray that you're safe. I pray that you're blessed. And I want to thank you for spending some time with me in this study. And it is such a joy to worship such a good God and such a mighty and great God. And thank you. And I hope to see you again sometime. Bye.